I'm John GRAFFT, and I love Chicago real estate. Between showings, I stop in my favorite places, talk with local business owners, and bring their story to you. This is my Chicago.
Yeah, it definitely, a lot of my friends from that era in my life are super interesting people. They could, entrepreneurs, school teachers, just people that wanted to do things differently. Mm-hmm. So they're just like, hey, I'll come out here and try this out. Because it's still kind of quasi-American, but at the same time, you get a lot.
It's weird, yeah. Like
it's Japanese, Hawaiian.
Yeah.
There's a lot of.
And it shouldn't be America. Like it is, but it's not.
It doesn't.
We bought it.
It doesn't feel like it. I mean, there's a Costco.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can get.
I was surprised. We went to the Walmart to get some things, and we're like, this is as cheap as anywhere else. We were really surprised.
Major goods like that, yes. For whatever reason, like milk and
milk was normal prices.
It was more expensive when I was there, so maybe it's gone down.
I think it's going down. My wife made the same comment. She's like, milk used to be $8 a gallon.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, exactly. That's how much it was. Yeah, it was like $8 a gallon for milk. Eggs were expensive. Beef was out of this world expensive. Yeah. But they do have like whatever you would call that, a cattle farm or something like that up in Waimea.
It's the second largest cattle farm in the country.
Yeah.
I think it used to be the first.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah. It's super cool.
Who would ever imagine that? There's a cattle ranch on a big island.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And they said the best stuff goes to Japan.
Yeah.
Same with the fish.
Yeah.
Like U.S. doesn't even get it.
Yeah. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. I didn't know that. That doesn't surprise me though.
Yeah, they said they pay more. Japanese are just going to pay more. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's super, super unique stuff.
So how long have you been here?
Since March.
Since March.
Yeah.
How long have you been doing this?
A version of this my whole life.
Okay.
Yeah, like garage type stuff, and then got into like bigger stuff. So yeah, pretty much my whole life. My dad taught me a lot of stuff, like most carpenters and things like that. And then I went the corporate route because I was like, I don't want to be like my father. That sort of irony is that sometimes you wind up in a role that you didn't necessarily plan for yourself. You know? So. Yeah.
What were you doing in the corporate world?
I worked for major IT companies, things like that, doing sales, marketing, stuff like that. It was a lot of fun. Got to travel. I've been everywhere you can possibly imagine, even places you can't imagine.
Were you doing it in a sales role?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was the transition where you wanted to get back to doing this?
It was kind of interesting because I built something for my wife. And I didn't know anything about social media. So I posted a picture of what I had built and some famous designer saw it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I can say the name of the company, but
say it.
No, I'll keep that private because it was a private discussion.
Okay.
But yeah, no, the gentleman was famous. He saw it. He was like, that's brilliant. You should sell those and you should do this. And then, so I took out some ads on like Instagram or Facebook at the time. I don't remember which one. And all of a sudden I got a ton of orders.
Interesting.
I got like 10 orders for the thing, and I was like.
So did you just build like an e-commerce shop real quick, or how?
No, I didn't do e-commerce. What I sort of learned, I learned as I went along. So the way my business is able to actually function is that we're sort of in that space where it's like semi-custom, right? Mm-hmm. Because like people are going to come to you and they're going to need a bed because they have a wall that's only 110 inches and it's a specific size, or a dining area that can only fit a table that's like this size. Mm-hmm. Or they would buy it readily made, right? So they'll come to me for something like this. We'll cut it to a certain size and we'll put it in their environment. So that's the business model.
Do you install it too?
I used to, but as I've gotten older and more brittle, when you're lifting like a 10-foot table, it can be problematic and things like that. So there's some movers in this building, and being in workshop 4200 is huge because I can get my photographs taken here, which I do. I can have the movers just walk into my shop and take what I've built and then deliver it for me, and I show up to help with the setup. So that's how I handle all that now. But I used to deliver everything and go rent a truck and.
Oh, what a pain!
It's brutal.
Yeah, that's not worth it.
It's not fun either, because then you got to con a couple of your buddies in to help you and stuff like that. Gidget would help, but she can't lift anything. So.
What was it that your dad did?
My dad was kind of like me too. He was a corporate guy. He was actually an IT guy. So he used to program, like, you ever seen those like 1960s NASA looking machines.
Yeah.
Yeah. That were like
With
fed.
on a cell phone.
Yeah, exactly. So like they had a card, a punch card.
The punch cards. Yeah.
Yeah. So my dad used to do the punch cards.
No way.
Yeah. So like I'm weird in that my father, if he was still around, he'd be like, I mean, he'd be 100 pretty soon. But yeah. So he was born in 1930, and I was like his second family, right? So, you know, I'm the youngest of like all of my half siblings. Yeah.
Okay. How old? So that's funny.
Like 20-year difference. They could be my parents.
So I have two half sisters. Same thing.
Really?
My oldest sister is about as old as my mom would be.
Yeah. 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 My dad, the same situation.
It's weird, but
It's weird. It's weird. Yeah. You know what I mean? But like at the
people
same.
look at us like, what? I don't understand.
Now, did that change like your understandings of like music and things like that?
I wouldn't say music. I'd say family. Like
Yeah.
a family dynamic, right?
Yeah, but I grew up with like a record player and stuff like that. Like
Oh, like
legit.
that.
You know what I mean? But I also grew up on a farm.
I grew up on tapes.
Okay. Yeah. So we're a little bit spread apart in age. But
Yeah.
yeah, I grew up with a record player and a single phone in the whole house. Like we didn't have internet or anything
Okay.
like that. Yeah.
And so your dad got out of that and was woodworking, or was he always woodworking?
He did woodworking on the side. He was kind of a Renaissance man, and he did a bunch of different stuff, realty, oddly. But, you know, and once he had like finished his first career, he kind of bounced around and did a lot of stuff.
Got it.
So, but yeah.
And what draws you to it?
It's, you know, I kind of looked at it from a pragmatic perspective, which is, you know, what if I could, you know, one of the things that sort of frustrated me about some of the corporate world was, you know, somebody gives you something and says, sell this. But what if that's not what the market wants?
Yeah.
And then you're in a very difficult spot.
And it's your fault.
Correct. Yeah. So, but what if you could control what was produced? And that's how I sort of started thinking about it, right? Because if you have that sort of control over what's produced, and like yourself, right? Like if you're talking to the clients, you know what they're looking for, you know what they want. And now that I can control production, it gives me the ability to meet the demand of the market and everything, you know? So that's kind of what drew me to it. I also loved working with wood. And it turned out, you know, by luck that I was actually pretty good at it too, you know? So I had always sort of thought of things, like you ever read that Malcolm Gladwell essay on, what was it, the 10,000 hours thing? Mm-hmm. Did you read that?
Yeah.
Do you believe in it?
Yeah.
Why?
Because I fit in it, so it's easy for me to sell myself using that.
True. Part of that is true. I do think his 10,000 hours, you can become an expert.
The reps. It's just if you're doing something for so long, you're going to have more experience doing it. And so I don't know if it's exactly 10,000 hours or whatever it may be.
Correct.
But there's a total difference. I can meet someone who's been in this business for 2 years,
Correct.
even 1 year, even 5 years, and I know the difference between them and me.
Correct.
And so it doesn't matter how many transactions you do. It's like, how many people were you with?
Correct.
How long have you been doing this? What have you seen? How long have you really been around the block yet?
Correct.
Because like I've been doing this for 12 or 13 years now, full time, and it's every year there's something new.
That you love.
Every couple of months there's something I didn't experience before, and I know it's only going to continue. And then at the same time, there's a lot of things that just happen exactly like other things.
Correct.
But we just had this thing in Wicker Park that took months and had all these different elements and variables that we've never had to deal with before, and it was exciting and different. At the end of the day, we got $20,000 off the price for our client, just because we made the other person do it, because it took so long. They wanted to get it done, and they just threw it out there to give it to us because we were taking so long. We're like, okay, well, sure, thank you.
Yeah. I agree with the hard work thing. Mm-hmm. I think that that's huge. You know, like that's definitely a big perspective of, I mean, a big component to what I do here, to what like someone who's successful like yourself. I think that's a huge perspective to it. The thing that I don't think I realized, like, I can dunk a basketball, but someone who's 5'6" can't. Sometimes there's inherent talent that's involved where it's just like, you can just do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I'm lucky enough to be 6. Now, I can't run to save my life.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're like, hey, go run 5 miles. Like when I've done like 5Ks, there are people passing me who are like 92. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, I should not be doing this. You know what I mean? Uh-huh. So I think there are those certain components in life where you have a certain aspect of that. Now that you can probably get to a different plane of that with the 10,000 hours. You know what I mean? Like maybe it'll be inherently easier for me to go play basketball than someone else. That's what I sort of found in this, is that I had an ability, you know, I remember explaining it to one of my buddies who was in a similar industry as me at the time. And I explained to him everything I was going to do, and I could see it, and he couldn't. Mm-hmm. And then I realized that there's different forms to that too, which are, you know, like the ability, spatial intelligence and things like that. Like I don't have a great memory. It's horrific. You know what I mean? I'm not good at that stuff. You know, I can transpose numbers and things like that. Heck, that's how I met my wife. I got my zip code wrong on a dating app. I'm not kidding you. But when it comes to seeing something, like the first time I built a piece of woodwork, I didn't draw it. I did it all from my brain. I didn't even write the numbers down with the size I was going to use. That stuff I could always do. But if you were like, hey, get your zip code correct, I can't do that, you know.
How do you know what to create? How do you make those decisions?
I look, it's a combination of things. I look at the market to see what is being made, and then I'm like, how could I do something that's unique and different from that? And is it cool, right? So it was sort of like an oddity that happened. I started getting clients that were like buying, you know, they'd buy a credenza and then they'd buy one of my tables. And what I sort of determined was, I was like, well, wait a minute. Apparently I'm appealing to a certain percentage of the population that finds the same things cool that I find cool. And that was that, you know? And it was like, I just started building what I thought was cool. And people were like, all right, I'll take 2 of those. You know, and that's how it happened.
Are people coming to you with an idea, or are they picking from a showroom? How does the sales process work with your business? Some
of the best ideas I've come across are not mine. Mm-hmm. Clients, you know, they can come up with the worst ones and then also the best ones. This woman that I met, she had this idea. I do these doors where they're sculpted. You might have seen it on the website, yeah. Right? They're carved, right? She's like, can you do that in a clock? And I was like, that's brilliant. You know, like, and you know when that customer comes to you and they tell you about that, they're like, hey, you know, I can usually be like, that's an awesome idea. You know, and sometimes they come to you, like I had one gentleman who called me up and he's like, I want you to take my credenza and it's 6 feet. I want you to make it 3. And I'm like, I can't do that.
So it's the crazy. Actual piece?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. As crazy as some of the things you get requested, at the other end of that spectrum, there's this brilliance in people, and they'll see things that I do, and then, you know, they'll come up with their own version of it, and it can be amazing, you know. And I've made, you know, all of the tables that you've seen have some influence of the customer in it, right? They're looking at it, they're going, hey, can you do it this way? Can you do this? Can we do this? And can you make this black? Can you make this gray? You know, and then I'll throw out other suggestions, and then we come together in kind of this final piece, and that's what you see when it comes to the website.
Are people coming to you, so something like the clock?
Yeah.
You know how to do the woodworking.
Yeah.
But what about the mechanics and the gears inside and everything like that? How do you figure that part out?
That's, and you probably experienced some of this in your business too, grit, determination. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And when you really poke down inside of a lot of the other businesses in the world, you'll find out that you had to figure it out at some point. Mm-hmm. You know, you just have to have that attitude where it's like, okay, I've never made a clock before, but at some point I never made a table before. Yeah. And at some point before that, I never made a bowl, I never made a pen, and all of the things that I started out making, I've never made them. And that's one of the challenges in custom woodworking, is that you can, like if you're gonna do custom, and I sort of fall into that realm of semi-custom, right? Like I have products, people start with those and they go from there. If you do full-blown custom, the requests you can get are out of the world, you know.
What's the craziest thing you've got?
Probably the one to cut down the credenza. Like that was out there. This is definitely really out there.
I can't even imagine what was going through his head to think, I can make this smaller. I mean, it's already
I'm sure it made sense, but I could do it. I cannot promise you it will look good.
Yeah.
You know, like, but yeah, you get lots of requests like that. Now the challenge that you've got to weigh in that, and I think it's a pitfall for a lot of woodworkers, right? It's economies of scale at that point, right? Like if you're going to do custom and you've never done this before in your entire life, and there's going to be something entirely new here, you have to plan for the unknown. Now, unfortunately, in a lot of my experience, when you get into the full-blown custom, some of the clients, they don't want to pay for that, the unknown. You know what I mean? They want the economies of scale. Like I've built a ton of these tables. I know what's going to happen within reason. If something goes wrong, I can plot for X or Y and stuff like that.
Fixed price.
Correct, right? And that's what they like. But at the same point, you know, the customers absorbing that cost can sometimes be problematic for them. And it's also problematic. You want a pet, huh? Come here. It's also problematic for the woodworker at the same time too, because it's like to plot out the amount of hours you've got and stuff like that. it can be challenging. That can be, and I've gotten caught in that realm before too.
Because you give a quote, and then
things change.
It's higher.
Right.
You go to the person's like, this is what we talked about.
Right.
What's the biggest variable you've had in something like that, you think?
Oh, thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah, like some even on like things where I've done them 100 times or whatever, it can be, something can go wrong and you can be out $2,000, for the cost of the wood. So, sometimes you're lucky. Like when I first started in a lot of the custom projects, you're lucky to break even, and sometimes you're even paying to do that at the same point. Now, what I sort of found with things like the clock and stuff like that, is if it fits the brand and I think it's cool and I can replicate it, then I'll take that chance on that product, because like then I can do those things, right? And turn that into a product and benefit from the economies of scale and then sell it again and again. Now, like with the clock, that Lauren, she was brilliant. That's literally the first. The technique is called power carving. That's the first, to my knowledge, power carving. Okay. Basically, you take a grinder, carve it out, and then sand it out, right? That's the first clock that I know of in the entire world that's power carved, So, and I've done quite a few of them now. I just did one that was out in the suburbs too. So
you did this once, and now you're showing it to people, and like, please make that for me.
The clock self-replicates.
So that's cool. As soon as you do anything, someone sees it, they want it.
Yeah, like I call her Christine, my best customer salesperson. She's sold like 3 clocks because she has one. She shows it to all her friends, and they're like, "I want that, but I want it like this." That's the interesting part, is that those great ideas from the client, they replicate. So the first time, I showed you that cutout, right? Mm-hmm. The first clock I made was separate boards, all glued together, right? And then I got the idea, what if I just took a single piece of wood like this? How cool would that be? And then that woman came up with that idea, Jellica. So, she influenced it in that way, and then we changed things. She changed the color of the hands and all that stuff. And now it's up on her wall, and she just got another one of her friends to buy one. So that's how it sort of like lives on. Those are the types of projects that I try to stay with, right? Because like then I can replicate and do something that I know what the outcome will be, and kind of control that a little bit more.
Did you start doing this in a garage?
Basement.
In a basement?
Yeah.
What did it take for you to know?
Garage, basement, and then shop. Yeah.
How did you lead to the shop? Like, at what stage were you at your business or your production where you're like, I need something bigger than this?
When I got my zip code wrong on the dating app. So I was out in the burbs of Connecticut with endless space. So where a garage could be, whatever you want, right? And then I moved here. So I kind of had to put a little pause on everything to find a spot like this. And my first spot was smaller than this. Okay. It wasn't even that big. And I started making all the prototypes and things like that. And, the clocks, the tables, the credenzas, things like that. I started making them there. And then that's when I realized real quick, like once the product started to sell and people started to buy them, that I needed more space. And even now, 4 or 5 years ago, I was making coffee tables, and now you saw the slabs that are taller than I am. So, that becomes a bit of a challenge in itself too, because even that shop that I just showed you, it can be too small sometimes, which is why we have this storage over here.
Off camera, we were talking about Big Island, and I saw some of the coolest pieces, the coolest tables made out of local wood there.
Sure.
And it reminded me a lot of the stuff that you do.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
How'd you get into this? I mean, were you ever building something else and trying to go in a different direction? And
Oh, yeah.
The market kind of pushed you here?
No, I found what I did was, it's one of the few moments that I could actually say I was, moderately intelligent. I found this gentleman down in Dallas who, I think if you're going to go somewhere, get somebody that's where you want to go, right? Find that guy or woman, whoever it is, and talk to them. Because, if you, and luckily, the gentleman who I talked to became my friend.
What was he doing there?
He's where I want to go eventually, right? And he does like gigantic tables, like 20, 30,
so
40
not
feet.
in terms of Texas, but in terms of business?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so that
So you've
gentleman...
been in Connecticut, Texas, Big Island, any other places?
Colorado, California, South Carolina, Illinois.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's the most boring of them all, I think.
No, my
Texas.
wife lives here. She's awesome. That's the reason I moved here.
Is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
totally. Yeah, I messed up my zip code. Connecticut zip code is 06040.
Oh, you really messed it up.
Yeah, I transposed 2 numbers. But see, that's the happiness. You know, I had a learning disability as a
great
kid.
story.
Yeah, I had a learning disability as a kid, and you know, you just learn to live with it, right? You're
Yeah.
just like, hey, this is how my brain thinks, the way it is, right?
Yeah, there's no fixing it.
No, you know, and I'm still at 44 years of age making mistakes like that. Now, granted, I get the dimensions on one of these. I like triple check and make sure. But yeah, so I messed my zip code up on a dating app, and you know, I was living in the middle of nowhere, Connecticut, and that's how I met my wife. I matched with her, and I didn't think she was real because where I was living, there were not, you know, single people they had hundreds of children. And then, you know, I didn't have any kids, and I met my wife when I was like 40. And then I figured out, I was like, oh my gosh, you know, at first I thought she was fake because she didn't have any kids. She had a great job. She was, you know, athletic, doing stuff outdoors, beautiful, intelligent, worldly, you know, everything, right? And, you know, so we chatted for like 2 weeks, and I told her originally, I was like, I don't know how we matched. I think you're in Chicago. I'm in Connecticut. I'm sorry. And I tried to get rid of her, right? I was like, good luck.
Took you 2 weeks to figure that out?
No, I did that right away. I'm telling this story in a really out of order type thing. I'm doing a poor job with it. And she's going to correct me when this comes out. But basically, we connected. She messaged me, and I said, hey, you seem really cool, but I think I messed my zip code up. You're in Chicago. Wish you the best of luck. And she was like, well, how do you think we matched? And I was like, the app said, make it so. Now, do you know where that's from?
No.
Star Trek.
Okay.
You have to be a super dork. Right? And I figured, you know, in my head, I'm going,
Than a dork.
I'm a nerd, yeah. So I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, how do I get rid of this woman in a way that's like, you know, she's not going to want to hang out with a dork. Like, come on. You know what I mean? And so I said that, and then she responded with, how did you know I like Star Trek? That wasn't on my profile. Then I was, you know, then that was the end of it. And then I was traveling for work, and I think I was in Germany. My flight got canceled back to where I was going, and I was like, all right, I'll come spend the weekend, see if I can. And then she walked up, and she was beautiful, but she was goofy, and she was like aware of it. You know what I mean? So like she was sort of like, I don't want to say she was like stumbling, but she was like, you know, gawky and
goofy.
Conscious of it. You know what I mean? And I thought that was the coolest thing is that
She owned it. She knows who she is. Just
right.
Like
Somebody
you
that
have the learning disability.
Right, exactly. Right. So like, yeah, and it worked out really well in this case because my wife's awesome. But yeah, that's how I met her. And then when she walked up, she was beautiful and, you know, awkward and then nerdy and everything I was looking for. So it was awesome.
And where'd she live?
Bucktown.
In Bucktown.
Right.
So that's how you started. That's how you
Correct.
got there.
Correct.
What did you think about Chicago when you came here first?
I'd been here a million times.
Okay.
Yeah.
What were you here for?
Work over the years. Like when they shot Batman, they did all the different things. I've seen all of that stuff. Yeah, I've been here. I never made it out of the loop.
Okay.
Like I'd never seen Wicker Park where I
People
live.
travel here. It's the saddest thing because you hear that all the time.
It's hard.
I think if you travel to Chicago, you shouldn't
Yeah.
handle it. It's probably the worst place to stay.
It really is.
And everyone gravitates towards that because
Yeah.
of business and commerce and everything else.
Right, it's just easy
Yeah.
because it's like you get off the train and you go there and everything's right there. But yeah, when I got to Wicker Park where I saw where she lived, it reminded me a lot of like Brooklyn, stuff like that because it does mirror the East Coast in certain ways. you
Yeah,
know?
I can see that.
Yeah.
How long were you together before you got married?
Well, that's the interesting part about getting older is that when you know, you know. And I never thought, like I always thought that was junk. You know what I mean? When you're younger and somebody's like, oh, I knew I was going to marry this person.
Yeah.
And you're like, you know, I was always skeptical and I didn't get married until I was 42. And I've only been, well, that's going to be the only time I ever was married. So, but yeah, so I think we dated and I knew I was going to marry her within 3 months, you know. Actually, I knew when she walked up and she'll tell you she knew when she saw my picture. And I was like, okay.
What were you doing in Connecticut? Were you doing woodworking there too?
Yes.
How hard is it to move this operation from place to place?
It wasn't the scale it is now.
Okay.
So I had always done woodworking in everywhere I lived. You know, so I had kept it to things that were more portable and easier to get out the door, right? So when you live in the middle of nowhere, you sell things you can ship. You can't ship a 10-foot table.
No.
Easily.
Okay, got it. So you're making smaller things.
Correct. Yeah.
The
So
shipping's got to be such a pain in the ass to deal with that.
oh God. Yeah. So that's what that was part of the evolution, right? So like, you know, selling things on Etsy, And I met some of the most amazing customers. And
What were you making on Etsy?
Oh, I started making tables, coffee tables. It's how I study the market, and before I like really got into it, I studied that for probably 3-4 years. Because like that's one of the major components is to figure out how you can fit into all of that ecosystem. Like who are your competitors? How do you compete against them? What's different about what you're doing? All of those things. That's what Etsy taught me. So like I would learn about what everyone else was doing, and then I could see how I could carve out a niche for myself. That was a great pun. Unintentional.
How many competitors do you have here?
It's probably like, I think it would depend who you asked, So I try to do things where I don't necessarily have to compete as much, because that's what drives down the price and makes it impossible for me to make a living.
You're creating something that no one else is creating.
Correct, like a clock. Yeah. So if I'm making a clock, then I can make a living off that clock, because that clock, nobody else has not necessarily figured it out, but nobody else has done something like that yet. Yeah, they will.
And you had the customer come to you and ask for it, and that's
Correct.
How that originated.
Correct. She saw my work and wanted to take part of that work and kind of make it her own, right? So I'd probably say 2 to 3 major competitors, when I do like big tables and stuff like that. Now on my, credenza, that can compete more on, it sort of ticks more boxes, and it really depends on the sort of vertical market that you're going to get into with the type of furniture, right? So if you're making something that's mid-century, your costs are going to be driven down by like Crate and Barrel and things like that, because they've sort of got that market covered really well, right?
So West Elm, they got a bunch of that
West
stuff.
Elm, yeah, exactly, right? And that's
it's good enough, like for people.
Correct. Yeah, it'll fit 80-90% of the market, and then there's like 10% of the market left over, where you can do some super high-end crazy stuff, some really unique mid-century stuff. There are people that will pay for that, right? That's a tougher market though, because it is so broad, right? Whereas if you're doing like exotic tables or big, huge things like that you've seen on my website, there's not as many people that have that machine I showed you earlier. That sort of helps set me apart a little bit in that world, where there's probably not as many people doing that stuff as there is mid-century or whatever style of furniture.
I feel there's a lack of craftsmen and artisans in general. It doesn't matter what trade you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Woodworking is definitely one of them, but there's a much lower appeal to this that there maybe once upon a time. Everyone wants these more sophisticated jobs, or everyone wants to work online, do these different things, but a skill like this is really dying.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a sense, yes. I think there might be a renaissance.
I think you're right about that.
Yeah,
There's
I think
resurgence of this type of
correct.
A love of these original things, something that wasn't just mass manufactured in China somewhere and shipped here.
Correct. Yeah, my mentor, for example, was a chemical engineer.
Okay.
Petroleum engineer. The gentleman I told you about in Texas.
Dallas.
Oil.
Oil.
Yeah, so everything in Houston, Dallas areas, all like
okay.
oil and things like that. Yeah, so he was doing that stuff, and me obviously doing something different. The interesting part is that I've met like a ton of people who are like me and come from different backgrounds and things like that are attracted to it. And it's had a tremendous impact on like my life too, in terms of like fitness. Like the day they did the Chicago Marathon, I ran 5 miles and worked in my shop, right? And I was number 2, I do the fitness trackers in the whole city that day. And I'm like, I didn't run half as far as these people. All I did was like pick up 200-pound things and move them around. And the amount, it's had a real impact just physically on me and making me feel a lot better, rather than sitting on a plane, being stuffed in there, eating bad food, stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, I think there definitely has been a renaissance with it. And it's become, when 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when I went to college, I wouldn't have thought of this, But I don't think I would have had the success that I've had. Come here. I don't think I would have had the success that I've had without that background, because that has enabled me, again, 20 years of doing that. You're going to understand, like you'll notice I talked a lot about the market. I talked about those things, and the craft is super important. But being able to, realizing that I need to study this for 2 to 3 years to figure it out, to see where I can fit in. I would not have done that if I didn't have the background that I did. I would not have looked at it like that. So I'm very blessed and grateful to have that in my life.
What was it that made you know this would work here? what the market.
The same way I knew I would marry my wife.
Okay.
It's tough, like you can just see. And as I've come along, I've realized it's like the use of negative space when you build something.
What's negative space?
So like when you see a slab like this, a lot of people will just take two of them and put them together. Right, but really what you're looking for is what is, if you have a slab that's curved like this, right, you want to fill that in with something else.
Okay.
So to be able to find the image of it, and if you look at a lot of the work that I've done, you'll see a lot of that.
So the negative space would be
Right.
empty space like
Correct.
we saw on the other thing?
The empty
Under
space
the
and
slab.
say like this one here, if it had,
Like right there, right?
no, like here on the outside, you can see
Oh,
these
this.
curves.
Okay.
Right, these aren't particularly curved, these ones right here, and they'll be used for something else. They're not used in like what I would do, I would look for something that's more broadly curved like that,
It's like, okay.
Yeah, and I can send you
More
some.
like that.
Correct. And then how are you going to fill that space in? How are you going to make it appeal to more people? How do you make, because anybody can take two of these and slap them together. That's not hard, right? But how do you make it look aesthetically pleasing? And that a lot of that came from my own personal taste. Like how do I make it look weird? So, I was out in Seattle and I found a Sawyer and he had stuff that we don't have out here. So then I started importing it, and it's all curvy and different and weird and awesome. And then I started putting multiple pieces together. And that's what, you see in a lot of my work now.
Do most of the species of wood stay the same from project to project?
No, it's great. It changes all the time. So, I've done monkey pod, Perota, big leaf maple from Canada and northwest United States, Calero walnut down in California. So I pick all of the weird ones, the things that, a lot of people are doing a lot of local stuff, right? And they'll get all the local woods and they'll use those. And then again, as we talked earlier, who am I competing with? At that level, right? Being that I've gone out and flown out and met a lot of the Sawyers that I work with, I can get things that, and these are from people that I trust and develop relationships with over the years. And they send me things that are just out of this world weird. So that's what I go for.
When you do that, do you go on a website and pick them out, or are you just calling these guys saying, hey, this is my project, this is what I want?
The Salmo world is like really, it's evolved to text message images.
Okay.
There's a couple that have like online inventory.
Because these are
Gidget,
lumber
stop.
guys, right? Like,
Sit down, Gidget. Yeah, they're lumber guys. But they're also like ex-salespeople, come here, Gidget.
So people like yourself that were
Correct.
doing something else,
Correct.
wanted to change in life, wanted to
Correct.
get back to some roots of civilization.
And a lot of them did it early in their 40s too. You know what I mean? Where they're decided that I want to change, I want to do something different, right? So, like my buddy Craig's one of them, and he was doing something else. I forget what he was doing. Come here, Gidget. And he changed his mind and he became a Sawyer. And then he started selling slabs. And yeah, he has some of the best wood that I can find around, And
So are those guys cutting them down themselves, or
are they a middleman between the original person who's cutting down the trees and you?
no, see, that's what's interesting. The online inventories are usually middlemen,
Okay.
right? Because they understand technology, scale, and things like that. The Sawyers oftentimes don't have that sort of background. So, you can buy from the middleman, and they do have great supplies, things that are super unique, and awesome stuff. A lot of the places I buy from are the actual Sawyers. So they're the people who cut the tree down. They're the people who let it dry for 2 years. So all the
These things are aging?
yeah, like
Okay,
whiskey.
yeah, what's that process like?
Yeah, so a good Sawyer will cut it down and let it age for like 2 to 3 years. So it'll be cut down as a log, and then when it's cut down as a log, things will leak, the tannins will leak out to the edges. That's why you'll see in a lot of my work, you'll see the spectrum of colors. Gidget, come here, Gidget, sit down. You'll see the spectrum of colors, right? And that spectrum of color is what makes my stuff really unique, because a lot of, certain Sawyers will just cut it down and immediately cut it into a slab and immediately do that, right? And that becomes, it's a good looking piece of wood, but if you want that full spectrum of color.
How do you pull the colors out? Because I've noticed in some of your works, it's really different.
Looks like an ice cream cone.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It's really changing all the way through. It's rich.
Yeah, so, yeah, you actually looked at my stuff. A lot of that is just, it's inherently there. So you have to know what you're buying, and you have to narrow down, like, you have to go see the sawyer, figure out that. I've gotten to the point where I can just look at a piece of wood and I can be like, oh, okay, awesome. So generally, that becomes a me flailing my arms around type process, and this needs to improve for sure, right? This is an area where I want to change in 2022. I need to teach myself how to use CAD, and I also need to take and build like samples and things like that. So there's certain things you're going to be looking for, like on these, like some of the edges of these are burls, right? And I love those burls, and it's actually a cancerous growth within the tree.
That's what a burl is?
Yeah. Or that's what I've been told.
Okay.
So from some of the sawyers. So it's like a nonlinear pattern that sort of arises in particular species. And you can get burls, you'll see them on trees when you walk by outside. They're these big growths that are just on the side. Those are what I use for negative space. Okay. They also have insane figure. So like that's what you're talking about right there, is that when you see all that stuff, it's awesome. It's different, and you can, like pull something out of a piece of wood that, nobody else sees. And that's pretty cool.
I never knew trees had cancer.
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Well, that's how a lot of
makes a lot of sense too. That's
how they come to us, So like a lot of the trees that I get are, they're falling down, and those are the ones that's honestly what you want.
Why?
Because that's where it's falling down because of imperfection.
Okay.
And the imperfection makes it
interesting.
Crazy. And, I'll pull out a lot of rot out of these slabs, and I'll pull out all of, nails. I pulled barbed wire out.
Yeah, I bet.
Stuff like that where it's just embedded in it. And there you go, and then you get, like they grow up in pastures, but then they have to come down because somebody's building a new fence line or something like that. Or it's rotten and it's falling down. So you're really giving these trees a second chance to do something rather than become firewood, which is cool.
We found you through Esmé in Lincoln Park when they were opening up. And what did you build for them?
Tables.
I
built the bases for the tables.
Okay.
Concrete tops from somewhere
Concrete
else.
tops.
Yep.
It's interesting to go to you for a base of a table. That's not something that someone's going to recognize or notice necessarily.
Correct.
Why did that happen? How did that happen?
That's the custom realm, right? And that's the area that I was talking about earlier, where somebody saw my work and they were like, "Hey, can you do this?" And Jenner came, and he's a super creative guy, really awesome to work with, and he had an idea, he had a vision, and that's what he wanted. So that's what I gave him.
What was that process like to figure out what it was, what you needed to make?
It was interesting. That one was definitely like a one-off type project. Wanted it to be very organic, wanted it to look very, very much like part of the environment, something growing out of it and things like that. And
that was the goal, to like it's growing out of the ground type of look?
Sort of, yeah. I mean, that's the whole, you have to see his restaurant to sort of see what he's got going on there. You know what I mean? Because it's, and that's the interesting part about what I do is it's, part of the overall scheme of what people are thinking. You know what I mean? So I'm just this little, I'm the table, or I'm the credenza, or I'm the table base, or one component to it, So people often have a bigger vision, and especially with the interior designers that I work with, a lot of them will have a bigger vision for the whole space, and you sort of fit into that component.
One component of it, right?
Correct. Yeah. And they're sort of the conductor, and I'm playing the trumpet. And I'm one part of that, So it's pretty cool to be a part of.
Growing this business, at what stage will you need someone else? And do you have, we were talking about people entering this business. Do you have people that have come to you and be like, "Hey, I want to do this. I want to learn this trade." Yeah. What does that look like?
I had someone that I worked with earlier this year, and that went great. I've kind of found that I like being by myself, and I like doing it that way. I will probably look into adding someone again next year. People do contact me, I'd probably say once or twice a month.
Okay. It's pretty often.
Yeah. I guess that means my marketing's working.
Yeah. Is that someone that wants training?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I get a lot of those requests, people that want to learn how to do it. I get a lot of requests from people with other backgrounds that just want to learn, and want to potentially move out of whatever they were doing, and saw kind of what I was doing, the same way that I reached out to who became my friend in Texas, that same way. So
you need to find the right person.
Yeah, I mean, it would be...
That's hard. It's really hard.
Oh, scaling?
You know, it took me 10 years to find Adam.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. Like,
it's tough.
It's tough. You can work with people, but there may not be a good relationship or like shorthand or whatever you want to call it. But it takes a long time to find someone that you really feel comfortable with and can trust.
Yeah.
Or that wants to be there. Right?
That's the big thing too, is that...
I imagine the burnout's quick.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing that I think has made this work, I guess you could say it works, is that the amount of obstacles you will face where you fail. I mean, I fail 1,000 times a day. You know, it's like something, inevitably, you're working with an organic species that, you know, flexes. Like I've had it to the point where I showed you that big planer, I've planed something, and then I've come back the next day and wood moves.
Oh, it's warped?
And it warps. So all of the work that you put into that, you know, then you have to learn something.
So is that warping because there's still humidity or moisture in the wood? Or
Yeah, so you can only take them down a certain thickness at a time. And, you know, I made the mistake.
Oh, interesting. So you can only go down so much, and if you don't, why is that happening?
So basically, moisture is reacting inside of the wood with the air.
So it's coming out?
Correct.
So when you're sealing it, you're sealing it in.
Correct, but also
some
too,
level.
when like these things have to acclimate. You know, so the things that I'm importing come here and sit here. Like some of that stuff's been with me for well over a year and a half.
Oh, that's so interesting because, like, if you're installing hardwood floors, just that, something that's completely engineered, finished
Correct.
product, or if it's a raw product, it still has to sit in that room for a week before anyone can install
The engineered
it.
ones you don't, to my knowledge, and
You should.
You should let them sit.
Every type of wood should sit in the space before you install it. Yeah.
I don't think the engineered ones will warp as much. I would be very scared of the natural ones. I think
It's
they
the
would warp.
expansion and contraction. So they just, whatever space they're going into, they need to expand
Right.
or contract or whatever they're going to do for that
Yeah.
season.
So I'm learning something from you, which is good because we just bought a place, and my wife is like, "Hey, you know, you're going to do all the floors." It's good to know. The engineered floors I want to buy are going to have to like
Let them sit.
Yeah.
So you put them in, open up the boxes, and then come back a week later.
Yeah.
That's the best way to do it. Some people say 3 days, whatever. If it's going in my house, I'll wait.
Yeah, yeah. So fortunately, I'll wait for that too. But yeah, it's a similar concept too with these as well.
That's interesting.
Is that when
So you've had them sitting for that long, like a year and a half?
some of the ones in the other room are 3 years now that I think.
3
about it.
years.
Well, it's also like I bought them because I thought they were cool, and then
The project hasn't come along?
Well, so that's the interesting thing is that this spatial thing that I talked to you about a little bit earlier, right? It's until, okay, so it's kind of funny, right? Like I build black, brown, gold stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
What do you think people come to me for? Black,
Not-
brown, gold.
Okay.
And everything you see in the line, and it's interesting how people's minds work, right? So they're like black, brown, gold. That's the guy. Here, this, right? So in that sort of way, I have all these other things up here that are like, and sometimes they sit there for 3 years.
So maybe it's a gray or
Well,
something
maybe
else.
it's a different shape, or maybe
Yeah.
it's something weird, or maybe it's something.
But you saw
I
it,
just
you
have to
had to
find
have
the
it.
time to do it. And then when I do it, hopefully, like really hopefully, people will come and say, okay, wait, now I like that. It's the same thing with the clock, right? Like the person saw something else that and
That's got to be hard for such a large piece of lumber because you have to invest in the wood, you have to invest
Correct.
in the time on the hope that someone will buy it. And because would you ever build that before someone commissioned it?
Yeah, there's probably 20 grand of lumber sitting in there. Just sitting there. Like just waiting for me to actually, like that big tall one I showed you.
Yeah.
That's from Costa Rica. I know what it'll be. It's
Yeah.
in my head. I just need to get the time.
So it's more about the time than the customer?
Yeah, so for product development, for sure. So like, you know, the other night I was like concocting new solutions to stain some of these things and change the colors, you know. And yeah, that's what it comes down to is really realistically, like I don't think I'll be able to build everything I want to build in my lifetime because there just isn't enough time, you know. Maybe if I get super famous or something and like get like 30 employees, but I'm sure that then there will be a whole other slew of challenges that will take up my time.
Yeah. That's what'll happen.
Yeah, correct. But now I'm still at the point in the scale where I can take some time off and really like concoct something new or weird or different.
In a similar way, that's how I feel about my trade.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for a long time, and we're talking about ways to grow and
Right.
different ways to do it. And you're like, but is that what I want to do?
Right.
Like, I like selling real estate. I like doing this kind of stuff.
Right.
But it's like, do I want to manage 10 agents? I've done it before. It sucks.
Yeah,
It's not fun. It's not what this business is.
Come here, Gitch. Yeah, it's not ideal. Sit.
So are you like the cobbler's child in a way, where like, what's in your home?
I don't know that analogy. Tell me.
The cobbler's child has the worst shoes.
Oh, I used to be. Okay, so in a way, yes, potentially. But you'll see I do have steel-toed boots on, so I don't have the worst shoes, at least the most protective, right? My wife has a tremendous eye for design. And so in a lot of ways, a lot of the prototypes are in our house. Then, as I went along, the furniture got nicer because I got better at it. And now we have lots of nice things that were presents for her, right? So,
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, I'll find some, random slab and turn it into like a book match dining set around, and it becomes her 40th birthday present,
Okay.
So yeah, we have some nice things. Most of so I can't, okay, so when I build something, I'll see every mistake in it. So for me, and that's like, I'll tell clients that, and they're like, where are the mistakes? I'm like, you don't want to look at it with my eyes. I'm telling you that, because I see them and I just can't look at it. But yeah, so we have 2 pieces in our place. But now that we're moving, we're probably going to have a bed and a few other things. So there'll be plenty of time for me to make more mistakes.
So when you need something like a bed frame, are you thinking, I'm going to go make that?
Well, that's a great example of why a client will come to us.
Okay.
So we've got a wall that's 115 inches. So it's not 10 feet.
Yeah.
And being that I'm taller, I don't fit on normal sized beds.
You California? Yeah.
That's what I want.
Yeah,
But
of course.
I used to have one.
So hard to get the good sheets.
Well, yeah. I just want the bed. Forget about the sheets.
Oh, but wait till you get to the sheets.
I had a California king in Connecticut.
Yeah.
And then, my wife and I got together and she had like a queen. So I made that work.
You made a queen work?
Yeah. My feet hang off the end, but that's okay.
I can't make a king, because a king and a queen are the same distance. They're the same depth.
Length, yes.
Yeah. And so I have to be diagonal. So I'm on a king and I'm diagonal.
Get the Cali.
Yeah.
I had it once.
I'm not tall enough. So I'm cool on the diagonal. I don't mind the diagonal.
Yeah.
But it's just enough.
Yeah.
Just enough.
Yeah, I don't fit on either one of those.
Yeah.
So
And the California king is hard too because of the room you're in. Because it's taking up an extra, like it really goes into the room.
I think it's like, 4 or 6 inches?
Yeah.
It's 4 inches.
Yeah.
4 inches longer.
So in a lot of rooms, it's not going to work.
Correct, especially in the city.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was the biggest reason I never got one, because I was like, I'm going to move and I don't know if it's going to work somewhere else.
Yeah, correct. Come on, sit. Sit. Yeah, I think I got a dog hair in my nose. Excuse me for a moment. Can you sit, please? Thank you. Stay. Yeah, so I think that I'll wind up, that space we've got has got 115 inches. So I can make a headboard that's that long and then accommodate a California king. You can't buy that.
Yeah.
So I have to make it,
Okay. Bet you make a really cool headboard.
I haven't
Headboard
decided
would be
yet.
really cool.
It wasn't really a problem that I was thinking about because but yeah, it'll be weird. I almost changed my tagline on the website to I make weird shit, but my wife said don't do that. So, and she's in communication, so in PR, so I figured.
I agree. It's going to send the wrong message. Yeah. How did you know to move out of the garage and get this space? What was that?
Chance.
That inflection
Luck.
point.
Just rolling the dice. You just gotta jump in and see if you can do that. Because if you do that, you never know if it's going to work. How did you do it? I'm sure it's the same thing. You just were like, all right, I think this is going to work.
You gamble on yourself.
Correct.
You have to decide, do I want to stay where I'm at or do I want to try and grow?
Yeah, but
and sometimes you try to grow and it doesn't work, so you got to retreat a little bit,
And I've done that.
then you got to
Yeah.
come right back to it.
Yeah, or stay what you're competent at doing and scaling that first. Yeah, it was probably very similar to how you made that decision as well.
You're working with your hands. I mean, you can scale what I do through people, and I suppose you could do the same thing. But just as I always feel uncomfortable when the client's not getting my touch,
Right.
I imagine you feel the same way. You're like, if you could oversee it, sure, you're going to make sure it's right. I don't have that luxury. It's like I can't be in with you when you're looking at homes, but at least you can walk through the shop and check out the finished product before it ever leaves.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, that's going to present a very interesting challenge.
Yeah.
You know, because it is rather challenging to scale on that level, because it is, you know, if you look at the cost of wood, you know, it's probably 20% of the overall final price. You know, when you take into consideration, then you've got labor is the vast majority of it, especially when you get into like cabinetry and things like that. That's most of it.
You build cabinets?
Not plywood, like kitchens and things like
Yeah.
that, unless it's for my wife and we buy a new place and then I get roped into it.
You really make the cabinets?
For our place, I will.
Yeah.
But no, I've never made cabinets professionally. I've made credenzas and furniture. I stick to that stuff. I've got a bunch
That seems
of
to make more sense. Like cabinets are so specific and
difficult.
And so finished. Like it's a finished product, right? And your stuff's completely finished, but it has that raw, natural feel to it.
Right.
And I feel like if you did that with cabinets, it might go wrong.
I have had many things go wrong. I have had many things go wrong. Yeah, that's not an area I would expand into, because there's also not a relationship there where...
It's a commodity.
No, it's...
Sort of.
Depends.
Like nothing's very specific. Like people are going from place to place to place and they're going to find what they want, but a lot of times it's going to boil down to look and price, as opposed to this, like it's look, and then I'm going to figure out the price. Like I'm going to make it work, and I'm going to rationalize to myself, okay, we can afford this, we can do this because look how fucking cool it is, right?
Yeah.
Cabinets, that's never going to happen.
You can now I know guys, my friend Phil, you know, he makes super high-end famous people type cabinets and stuff like that. And that guy's work, he's like a scientist.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like you can there are people doing that in the cabinet world, because you can buy a table. It's the same logic, right? I could apply that to IKEA.
Yeah.
Or to that. But they're brilliant at the same point, because like IKEA, you know, I actually met a friend of my wife's who was I think he was like their CIO or something like that. And he was telling me about how they build all their own parts. And it was fascinating, you know, because the scale with which they're doing that. And what he told me about it, you know, they were that particular on their standards and things like that. And they've got incredible designs. Some of the things that they come up with, that's why they're so successful.
Yes.
And that's why they're like, you know, who do you want to be? You want to be IKEA, or you want to be, you know, Jerry? You know, eventually I'd like to be like my alma mater. I went to UConn, and one of our most famous graduates was Bob's Furniture.
Okay.
You know, and Bob is like killing it. You know, he's got a store here now.
Yeah.
It used to be just Connecticut, but he's got stores everywhere, and that's impressive to me. It really, really is. But back to cabinets, you know, I can sidetrack really easily. Sorry about that. Back to cabinets, it's the same thing. You know, you can buy your Home Depot cabinets, and they make great stuff. But what if you only have a vanity that's 14 inches in depth?
Yeah.
Standard ones are not. Now you got to go to a custom guy like Phil, and Phil's going to make you some killer stuff. You know, and he makes super unique, and he makes furniture, and he does a lot of broad stuff, which is cool. So
were there any products you were making that you decided you thought that's what was going to work, or you thought that's what you wanted to make, and then you've kind of gravitated in this direction? What were some of those things?
They worked, but they only worked to a certain price point, right? So again, it's styles of furniture make certain types of money. You know what I mean? Because if you make a piece of furniture, you know, that, you know, like the average carpenter, I think I looked this up one time, makes like $20-something thousand a year.
Okay.
Right. And if
that can't be right.
It's on like Indeed and Glassdoor and all
Really?
that stuff. Yeah, it was like 25 or something like that.
Okay.
So people aren't killing it. Doing
Is that like an apprentice? Because like
it could be.
Yeah, right.
You know, I'm just telling you what I read on Google, so
Yeah.
it could be completely wrong. I might just be.
The carpenters aren't on Google. They're not on
Indeed.
Indeed.
Be full of shit. You know? But yeah, I think I made things that failed horrifically. But that, I think, is what has helped me is resilience. And also, you cannot fall in love with don't fall in love with the product.
Yeah.
Because you can't let go of it.
We always say that about real estate.
Yeah, you can't let go.
Don't fall in love with the home. Fall in love with the deal. It's
let
different
go.
where you're coming at. Like you don't want to sell it to for someone who's buying a home. Like you need to fall in love with the home, but you need to fall in love with the deal too. It has to be good enough.
Yeah, and I didn't. I learned that really early on because I made things Like I made a desk, and I called it the minimalist desk, but it looked too much like something from Crate and Barrel or West Elm. So I couldn't charge enough for it. So I wouldn't make any money.
Interesting. Because your time, you put so much time into it,
right?
Regardless of how it looked, and it took so much time to make it look that clean and simple, right?
It did.
Yeah.
But it competed with an aesthetic that was mass produced. Right. And they make great stuff. Their designs are great. A lot of the stuff they make is beautiful, and it's that's why they're so successful. You know, they make amazing stuff. Now, at the same point, I can't compete with that. You know, I never can.
Yeah.
You know, I cannot come up with a one-of-a-kind type piece. And then the other problem is that if you get into those realms where you're making pieces that they're going to compete with, they can copy you way easier and just mass produce something that would fit their line way easier. I've never had that happen. I've only been copied a few times, so which is cool.
I imagine you're being copied by someone local. How do you know you're being copied? How do you know you were the one that came up with it?
How do I know I was? Because the guy actually emailed me.
Okay.
He actually pretended to be a customer. We had a common source.
This is some Machiavellian shit.
Oh yeah, he pretended to be a customer, asked a bunch of questions that a customer would never ask about how I did all these things, and I'm like, you're not a customer. I figured it out pretty quickly.
Interesting.
And then I contacted our mutual source for lumber. He's like, yeah, that guy was in here looking for you, because he had somebody that asked him, and that happens all the time. You know, so I'll show him how to do it. It doesn't bother to me.
Yeah.
He did. That's fine. You know, but yeah, it's happened a few times that I know of, like probably 2, 3 maybe.
In real estate, there's a real lack of community. Like some people will tell you there's a community, there isn't. Realtors don't want other realtors to be successful. It's like every time someone gets a listing, you're like, that should have been mine. And there's total lack. How about in the woodworking world?
Interesting question. How do I politically answer this correctly?
Don't.
I am, you know, there's a reason. No, I'm not politically correct in a lot of ways, so I'll just be Jerry. It can, in my experience, it's gone one of 2 ways. You know what I mean? So like if you see somebody who doesn't, like me, who doesn't come from that same background, there can be some fiefdoms, for sure, of carpenters who've been doing it for 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, whatever, and they can be very dismissive of that. They can also be very helpful, too. And I've met, you know, like my friend Phil, that guy's a rock star, you know, like he'll give you the shirt off his back, he'll teach you anything you want to know, and he's a legit, like, that was his primary profession, you know, but he's not insecure. So I think the question becomes, it's probably a replication of the insecurity in the general population. You know what I mean? Regardless of the profession. Well, people are going to be like that.
Well, he recognizes most likely that there's large enough market.
Right.
That like it's an abundance.
It's huge.
And there's enough for both of us. There's enough for 5 more people probably too.
Huge.
And you can just keep going in that direction. And that's the same ways in real estate. When agents are like that, I'm like, there's enough for all of us and then some. Just relax. We can all be friends. Yeah,
there's no reason not to be. There really isn't. Now, that doesn't mean I'm friends with every carpenter I meet.
Yeah.
You know, because they will act like real estate agents. People are real estate agents. Therefore, people are going to be a certain way.
The insecurity is a good point. I mean, that's really what it boils down to.
Stay. Yeah. It definitely is like.
And Phil's doing cabinets. You're doing something totally different.
No, he does furniture too.
Oh, he does furniture too. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, we've worked together on stuff. He's helped me out with a million things. I have learned, you know, just like he's learned things from me, I'm sure. I've learned our relationship has been mutually beneficial, you know. And he does like insane stuff. And I love the stuff he does. Now, it's different from mine. Different type of furniture, different this, different that.
So that's really interesting because I would think Phil's doing cabinets. Okay, no, he's doing furniture too.
He does both.
And you guys are working together?
Yeah, I'll have lunch. He'll come help me out with the project. He calls me about questions about epoxy, if he has a live edge slab, and we collaborate.
How are you continuing your education in this field?
Curiosity.
How do you learn?
YouTube.
That's what I was about to ask. Okay.
Yeah,
everyone can learn everything on YouTube now.
Yeah.
There's been so many people in these interviews when I'm talking to someone, if they're a crafts person of some type, even if they're starting a business, there's always this path to YouTube.
Yeah, well, there's some great people on YouTube that I've been fortunate enough to, like, as I've gone along, it's kind of interesting, right? Like there's some, I guess they're famous in the YouTube world and famous in the Instagram world, and which I am not. But they'll, you know, like I've reached out to, one of them was like Cam at Blacktail Studio. This guy does some of the coolest tables you've ever seen. And he's out in Oregon. And I actually was able to talk to him live. And, I bought like an hour or half an hour of his time or whatever, because I had some questions about how I was doing things.
Yeah.
Found him on YouTube like 5-6 years.
You bought his time?
Yeah,
You
he
paid
like
for it?
consults it.
Okay.
Yeah,
got
he'll
it.
give you a 30-minute consult or an hour consult or something like that.
Okay.
And that hour consult turned into, like we hit it off, and we'll go back and forth on Instagram occasionally. And then he saw like the clock I think I made, and he was like, "Oh, that's awesome!" And he follows me on Instagram, so it was kind of like flattering.
Yeah.
That the guy that I learned a lot from, like, now follows me on Instagram.
Yeah. And
then there was another gentleman, big Chicago influencer who's a woodworker, and he wound up following me too, and I used to watch him on YouTube. So cool. It's funny now, I think of all the YouTube accounts that taught me the most, now it's come like full circle. Where they're following.
You're learning from each other.
I don't know if I'm teaching them anything, but maybe they're just like encouraging me. I don't know.
It's cool there's a good, tight community like that, especially around the country. It's funny, we're going back to the realtor thing. Like, I have realtors in all different markets, right? It's harder to do it in your local market.
Yeah, I think it's, like the gentleman that I know, Dennis, you guys would hit it off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I think it's the mindset that you're looking for.
I agree.
And sometimes you're going to come across competition, and sometimes you're going to come across collaboration.
Yeah.
You just have to realize real quick, like, what direction that interaction is going to take. So,
what are some of the hardest things you've dealt with opening this business and running it?
Failure. Like I was naturally good at certain things. So when you're naturally good at certain things in like the corporate world, you just kind of progress, right? You deal with failure, you lose deals, things like that, right? Sorry. We're crossing feet there. Like there's been times where I've wanted to quit 1,000 times a day. And that's probably like one of the things that has kept me going, is that. Like being able to control that emotion and realizing that this is just a moment in time. It's almost like a Buddhist thing, right? It's kind of weird. That if you look at it from that failure outside of yourself, again, like you were saying earlier, right? What was it? Don't get wrapped up in the house.
Mm-hmm. Fall in love with the deal. Don't fall in love with the home.
Don't fall in love with the emotion.
Yeah.
Like realize that that's like a temporary thing that's going to pass, and that you're going to have that emotion where it's like, I want to quit. I'm going to fail. Everybody's going to laugh at me. All of the people that told me I could never do this, or they're going to be right. Like if you let all of that emotion in your head sort of spiral.
Well, it's amazing because you can use that as motivation, or you can use that as something to kick you down.
Oh, see, I love it. Like some of the people closest to me told me I was going to fail.
Yeah.
They're like, what are you selling tables for $2,500 on Etsy? And I'm like, oh, really? You think I can't sell one for $20,000? And that, and that's how my mind works. And it probably comes from, having the learning disability and whatnot, because people are like, oh, you'll never read. You'll never be able to do that. And if you let people do that, you listen.
Yeah.
You have to learn selective listening.
Yeah.
Like, my wife really believed in me, and she encouraged me and things like that.
Well, some people are so stuck on a certain road.
Yeah.
And when you try to do something,
Correct.
you infringe on what they're doing, and
You challenge their world order.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And
This is the way the
they
world
can't
works.
think that way.
Yeah, and
They're
you can't.
unable to. Their mind doesn't function in that manner.
Yeah, and it's like, well, I remember my favorite quote was, well, who's gonna buy a table from you? And that one still sticks with me today. And
That's
I'm like,
stupid.
Well,
Doesn't even make sense to me. Like, no, one thing, someone's not necessarily buying a table from you. They're buying a table they like. If you make
Correct.
something that's good, you don't matter really.
no, you don't. And
right?
that's why, like, when you look on the Instagram, you don't see, like, number one, I think this is the first time I've ever been on camera for the business. Actually, I know it is, because it's about the work. It isn't about me.
And that's why I'm here.
Right.
Like, I found it through Esmé, but I was like, this shit's cool.
Exactly.
We got to talk to Jerry.
Yeah, well, like, that's it. But, like, at the same point, I'm really bad on camera. So I can't
you're
do
doing
that,
great.
like, selfie talk to the camera thing. Like, I was talking to one of my designer buddies, and he was like, yeah, you should learn how to do that. I'm like, nah, I can't do that. I don't like being on camera very much.
Focus on the work.
That's what I do. Yeah. So I just,
Not everyone's meant to be on camera. It's not
No,
necessarily
I'm
the best way to do
definitely
it. And some people are on camera way too much.
Well, I'm
probably one of them.
I hired a marketing guy one time, and he's like, he tried to tell me, he's like, look at you, you don't look weird like those attorneys do on the I-90 or whatever it was on the way to Michigan. You see all those attorneys and they're like ambulance chasers, and I'm like, yeah, it's just not me.
Yeah.
So I just stayed authentic to like.
I hope he wasn't trying to put you on a billboard.
No, he wanted me to do like some of that talking to the camera thing, and I just don't do that. Occasionally I'll do it, but so I've just sort of stayed authentic to that and just make it about the work and, take pictures of that stuff, and people seem to like it. So they'll call me occasionally and buy some.
What's your most common order in terms of price?
Depends on the segment. So if you look at, when I first started, and I've had to raise my prices with the pandemic just because of like allocation.
Materials, supply
chain. Like when I used to ship stuff from Seattle, it cost me $250. Now it costs me $750 to like send just a skid in, right? Like one slab. $250 was absorbable, but $750 is a different world, right?
Yeah.
So, that price has gone up in the last year and a half. So like now the most common orders for tables, between $5,000 and $10,000 for stuff. Credenzas.
Is that a dining room table?
Correct.
Yeah.
Coffee tables are less expensive.
What do those run?
$2,500 and up.
Okay.
It depends, how crazy, how big, how unique, how weird it's going to get.
Is that just like a flat piece of wood on top and then some support beneath? Are there drawers and other types of elements built into it?
Depends what the client wants.
Okay.
Most of the time, for coffee tables, it has to be something weird from like Costa Rica that I say weird in an endearing way. It has to be unique, something like that from Costa Rica that's, really strange, and I'll use that sort of wood for that stuff. Then, I'll do like a custom metal base, and I don't do the metal fabrication. I work with metal fabricators. So something like that.
Are there any other parts of the business where you're working with other tradespeople like 100%. The metal fabricators?
Oh, yeah.
What are some others?
Metal fabricating, and I was just talking to my buddy, like maybe I should like subcontract out to do some of the spray finishing and stuff. Obviously I have an air compressor, I do spray finishing, but I want to change the way I do it, get better at it. And then, it sort of becomes a question about like, can I, like with welding, right? Welding's a great thing. I own a welder, never welded with it.
Yeah.
Because I realized after I bought it, I'm like, oh, there's a lot of people, there's people who can do this faster and better than I can, and there's other things I can do faster and better than they can. So if we collaborate on this, and I let them make the metal bases to the table, like, yeah, it took me a while to find a couple good welders, like I went through a few of them, right? Now I've got that. I've got a couple gentlemen I work with who are awesome, and they do amazing work. And then I've got a powder coater, so I take someone there. So I'm not able, with the financing that we've got presently, to do everything.
Nor do you want to, I imagine. Well, under one roof maybe, but not you, right?
Maybe. I am that much of a control freak.
Okay.
So I do have that streak in me. But at the same point, I realize what I'm good at and what I'm bad at.
It'd be great if you can get those people in the shop working
Correct.
there.
Maybe eventually.
Yeah, in the building, I mean.
They are.
Yeah, okay, so they're all here under this roof?
Yeah, there's a welder that I work with right now. Gentleman works full-time for Rooftopia, who's my neighbor. Chris is an awesome welder, and he's helped me out a million times. Phil knows how to weld too, and he's helped me out a million times too. So I have a lot of people that I can call upon with that sort of expertise, and I just met them through doing stuff.
A lot of the people that you work with, do you find that they were doing something else before, and they wound up doing this?
Depends.
Or they've been in that trade forever?
Depends. It's a 50-50 split.
Okay.
There are a lot of people who been painters forever. Like I work with my buddy Pete. He does a lot of the painting. I've had him spray paint. He's a car painter. He's painted for 20 years, and he puts this candy paint on there, and it looks insane.
Yeah.
And he does like crazy stuff. He's a great follow on Instagram too. Candy Van. And then Phil is Chicago Furniture Studio too as well, to give them shout outs because they're both awesome guys. There are people like that who've grown up doing that, right? And then there are people like me who didn't, and then just maybe learned like, oh wow, I know how to do this. This is cool. I can do a certain aspect of this this trade, you know, and I'm pretty good at it, so people will pay money for it, which is good.
If someone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do it?
Instagram, it's Bucktown Built, Jerry at bucktownbuilt.com, probably the website, bucktownbuilt.com. So.
And if someone wants to work with you, what should they know before they start the process? What can you tell them now to save them some time? Save you some time too.
Save me some time and them some time.
Yeah.
What could I tell them? Well, I mean, just to know that, you know, to be looking for something like what I've built, you know what I mean, in that sort of genre too as well. Because like I said, I get a lot of requests from people that, you know, want something that might not be my specialty, you know, or that I could do, but it isn't something that I want, you know, to do. It's not up my alley.
So the brown, blacks, and gold.
Brown, black, gold, you know, epoxy tables, live edge tables, credenzas, like what I've built so far, clocks. Those are the things too, you know. So if they want to work with me, it's within those sort of spectrum of products that I build.
This is a lot of fun. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, this is awesome.
It's such a cool shop and such a cool building. I had no idea this was here.
Yeah, I got to introduce you to a bunch of the other people.
Yeah.
So let's go do that.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Great.